past halfway in April, and this year I've taken part in Plein April, which is a challenge run predominantly on Instagram by the Warrior Painter group. And it challenges you to get outside and paint for every day in the month of April. So I thought I'd run you through my sketches so far. I'm using this hardbacked Strathmore mixed media sketchbook, which has 100% cotton paper, and I think it's 200 GSM. So it's moderately thick and great for sketching. My original plan was to go out every day and explore a new place in my area, and it hasn't quite happened like that because the weather has been somewhat challenging. We've had 80-mile-an-hour winds and freak rainstorms and all kinds that have made it really difficult to physically be outside painting. So I'll show you what I've done when it's just not been possible for me to get outside. In this instance, I braved the cold. It was sub-zero this day, and I took myself to my local park and I sat myself down in the cafe to have a coffee, which I captured with pencil and watercolour. And then I took myself off on a walk to have a look and see what I might like to draw. And at first, I did a little value study of a pile of recently felled trees. And then I translated that into a watercolour and I added some coloured pencil on top of it. These are the swatches of the paints that I used for this piece. And I really enjoyed being out there in nature. It was good fun sitting on my little camping chair, painting away. But I must say, it was so cold that I had to come home, put on 2 jumpers, have a cup of tea and get into bed, wrap myself up with extra blankets to try and thaw myself out. Day 2, we had a freakish day of sun. So here we have a little study of some tufts of grass that were growing in between my paving flags in the back garden. And they were casting really dramatic shadows because of that early morning sunlight. So I grabbed my camping stool again and set myself up with some gouache this time and painted away, focusing on light and shade, which is really what I want to focus on with my plein air work anyhow. Light and shade is really, really challenging outside in the natural environment where it's changing constantly. And doing small little studies like this make it more manageable for me. I think I'm a bit intimidated to sit down and do full landscapes, so most of my work is probably going to be studies for this month. Next up, we had some tulips that were still in bud, and I caught these standing up in my driveway, painting from the border in our front garden. Actually, what I did was I sketched this out in graphite, and this was one of the days where the 80-mile-an-hour wind was a problem, and it was picking up by the time I managed to get outside and do this. So I did my pencil sketch, and I took some video on my phone showing the flowers bending in the breeze and also showing the lighting on it as well. This was quite late afternoon. And that 10-15 seconds worth of footage I had on when I went inside to paint this with my gouache. And I used it as my reference material. And because it was a video rather than a still photograph, I found it a bit more closer to the plein air experience because the lighting was changing, the subject was moving, admittedly ever so slightly, and it wasn't quite so flat and two-dimensional. So I highly recommend doing that if you're finding it difficult to be outside. The next day, I decided to do a little sketch of the birdhouse we bought and fitted to the front of our little summer house at the bottom of our garden. Again, I've used gouache, but this time it's really quite watery, and I managed to do the whole thing, initial pencil sketch and gouache in the garden, stood up holding my sketchbook and trying to keep a hold of my paint palette at the same time. It's really difficult, actually, and that is one of the problems with Plein April is I'm not set up for plein air working. I don't have a pochade box or a sketch easel, and I really feel like I need something a bit more substantial that I can balance on. Otherwise, I'm so clumsy, I am going to drop paint everywhere one of these days. Then the next day, again, it was really quite ridiculously windy. This was Saturday, the 4th of April. And this is the view, or part of the view, from my studio window. We've got our wooden fence with a water butt, a leftover, what are they called? They're like perforated bricks for ventilation in a house. We've got some breeze blocks, a piece of slate, and two old steel watering cans, which I really like to paint, and I've done quite a few times now because they're a little bit mossy and mottled, and I really enjoy trying to capture the colour and tones in them. Back to some sun for the next day, and we have a view which is further away from my studio window. We're back onto farmland where we live, and these are some of the fields that I can see. To do this, I stood on our patio because it's slightly elevated, and I painted in the shelter of our house because it was really, really cold. But it was golden hours, so it was a lovely warm scene to paint. This crop of trees in the background is actually a heronry. We have greater egrets flying over and sometimes landing on our garden fence, which is just so wonderful. I absolutely love it. And I really like how I captured the trees in this watery gouache in the background there. I actually made a bit of a boo-boo and screwed up the values quite significantly here. We have some mounds of earth from the farmer recently tilling the grounds, and I just got it all wrong. So what I did the next day was I painted over with some deep ultramarine acrylic gouache, just this area here. And then I repainted with my traditional gouache, and it made it so that I could paint on top of the original painting without causing lots of runs and smudges and blurring. So that worked quite well as a fixer-upper. Again, I did it whilst looking out at the scene, but ideally I would have liked to have done it in the one sitting. What I've been enjoying doing is adding some text into my sketchbook as well. And here I've written Monday the 6th of April 2026, always tempting but always challenging. The fields behind our house are beautiful, but I find it hard to get the right amount of contrast. Very happy with the distant heronry tree line then. And that's what I've been doing with my work so far this month. I've just been adding little thoughts as I go along, as I don't want to be the sort of painter that sits outside with an easel and a canvas and paints a full scene in oils. That really doesn't light me up at all. But capturing small little snippets from real life is something that I really do enjoy. So I'm putting down all these little vignettes, these little mini sketches, studies of small items or areas, and then writing my notes to go alongside it. So what we have here for the next day, I pulled up at Birkdale Beach and parked my car literally right in front of this scene. And it was beautifully sunny, and there were lots of lovely shadows cast by this signage, the grasses and the wooden fence posts in the sand dunes. And I really enjoyed painting that. It was a challenge because the sun was so bright that it was sometimes difficult to see my sketchbook, and I had to keep moving it on my lap as best I could. I pulled my driver's seat back as far as it'd go and tried to just move with the sun. But I felt really happy with this. I would like to practice mixing greys and browns more, because I don't think I got the colours quite right. Or shall I say, I didn't quite like the colours. But mark making and the shadows and the overall composition, really happy with that one. The following day, we had some more sun and it was quite a bit warmer. So I took myself to Martin Mere, the local wetland wildlife reserve that I frequently go to. They have this really magnificent willow tree in a small island as you go onto the reserve, where lots of the birds that call that their home will swim around, and in particular the eider ducks and cape teals and the flamingos live around here. This tree has been there for decades now, and it's so massive that it started to split into two. So the last time I was there, one of the volunteers was taking a little tour a group of us on a little tour, and she explained how they pollarded it. They cut down all the branches every 5 years or so to stop it from actually formally splitting, and that way the tree could be maintained. It is a little bit sad because the weeping willow is really beautiful when the branches are out, but I'm sure we'll see new growth fairly soon from that. Next up, this page. I did a whole page for the day rather than just a little section. And I was interested by what is actually a weed growing next to my kitchen door. And the reason for that is that it has this really beautiful magenta purplish coloration with deep bluey greens. And I just thought it was really, really pretty. And I'm not one for flowers because I have horrific hay fever. But things that don't flower and just have leaves, I really, really love. And yes, I know he's a little invasive species, but I enjoyed painting that. It was freezing cold and I had my gloves and scarf and things on, even though I was standing outside my back door. But it was another good experience. And there was just enough shadow for me to have a play around with my light and shade theme. Also, early that morning, I was in the studio and I heard a bird singing and looked up at the fir tree at the bottom of our garden. And this little guy was sat on the very top. He's a greenfinch, and I don't believe I've actually seen him ever in our garden before. So I really wanted to capture him in my sketchbook. And I did a little pencil sketch and then added gouache on top. And I finished with a little bit of colour pencil to give it that sort of illustrative vibe that I tend to go for with my animal drawings. I've got a pair of binoculars that I keep by my side, which are right here, that I got for Christmas this year, which have been wonderful because I can actually see the birds up close. I haven't quite got a solution for capturing images yet, but at least I can see them. And I can have a look through the lenses, do a little drawing and go backwards and forwards. But the only problem, of course, is that birds move very, very quickly. So you have to hope that they're going to come back. On to the next day, I was at home the whole day and didn't really venture very far because of the weather. And what I did instead was I gave myself a free pass to use a still life reference instead of going outside. And although it's not quite as challenging because you don't have the weather and the lighting changing to contend with, still life I do feel is a really valuable experience and similar to plein air landscape working. And I chose to paint this philodendron silver sword that a friend had gifted me. Again in gouache. I ummed and ahed about adding the background, and after I did it, I kind of regretted it because it lost some of the contrast. But as a study, I enjoyed playing around with mixing the greens that I could see without making them highlightery, crazy vibrant. And I really, really love how it's got this kind of crazy curve shape and all the leaves are currently coming out from one point. And I think this is something that I'm going to be drawing over and over again because I really enjoyed that. So Saturday the 11th of April, we had a old bench in the garden when we moved into this house 4 years ago, and it is really weather worn and the paint has flaked off and a lot of the planks need replacing. So it's up on our patio waiting for a dry day for us to sand and varnish it. So in the meantime, we have this really old wooden bench with a lot of character and a lot of texture. So I had good fun exploring with colour and dry brushing to try and replicate some of the texture that I was seeing on the woodwork. So Sunday the 12th of April, this is a little watercolour sketch that I did super fast, stood outside. Our cherry blossom tree in the front garden has blossomed and it's really beautiful, but it's so fleeting. I wanted to capture it at least once, but I did intend on coming back and adding either a second layer of watercolour or coloured pencil to add definition to the blossoms. And I never did that. But now looking back at it, I think it served its purpose and I'm not going to tinker further, but I will come back and paint it again this season before the blooms go for another year. So Monday the 13th, I took myself back to the first place I went to, which was Hesketh Park. And this little clearing with dappled light was what caught my attention. So I plonked myself down on a wall, got my watercolours out and started layering up and tried to give the illusion of this really warm light in a little clearing between some very tall old trees and the dark sort of foliage either side. I'm not happy with my mark making and I want to revisit this. I think I've took plenty of video footage, so, I can always use that for further reference. But I do want to explore with this again because in general, it's a theme I'm aware of. I find foliage and sort of tree leafage in particular really quite challenging because I want a massive leaves appearance, but I don't want a solid colour. And trying to get that across in paint, I'm struggling with. So this was the first attempt. It's not bad. It's not where I want to go, but it's a learning exercise, this. So we'll take what I had and go with it. So yesterday was Wednesday the 15th of April and it rained the whole day long. So late afternoon, on the way to a friend's house to collect some plants she wanted to donate to me, I took myself to a coffee shop and this little guy was with his mum and dad and had sat right in front of me. So I thought, bingo, get the paints out and do a little study. I had to do it relatively quick because although he was quite good and did hold poses for some time, he didn't stay in exactly the same position for the whole time that they were there having coffee. So it was a challenge. I'm going to call this little sketch a life drawing or still life. So it's, again, my free pass to not do plein air every day when it's not possible. And I'm really quite happy that I managed to get anything done on a day when it would have just been impossible to be outdoors with the amount of rain that we had. And that's what we've got so far. So for now, that's everything. But I will check in again once April is over and show you everything that I painted in this month. See you again soon. Bye.